Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Shafer, and this is Talks with Dr. Shafer. I'm a physician, a musician, life coach, writer, and I am passionate about using storytelling as a tool to name, claim, and reframe your story so that then you can focus on reclaiming it and building your beautiful future. I am so fortunate today to have guest Jonathan Niziol. Jonathan Niziol is an international model. He is a real estate investor, and he has faced lots of challenges in his life that he has overcome with perseverance. And now he is using his voice to share and inspire others to hopefully go on that journey as well. Thank you so much for being here, Jonathan.
Thanks so much for having me, Dr. Shafer. It's a pleasure to be here. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this.
Thank you. I am too. I've been really interested. I've been watching your prior interviews and just couldn't wait for us to have this discussion. Could you start off our chat just telling me how things really started to change and pivot in your life and how that evolved over time?
Oh, it was a very specific time and day in which things changed. And that was the day before my 21st birthday when my mom passed away very suddenly, very unexpectedly. And my whole world as I knew it changed, like upside down. My life was over as far as I knew it, like you name it. My mom was the most wonderful person I've ever met in my life, and my best friend, my biggest cheerleader, um, huge mama's boy. She was not good at pretending I wasn't her favorite child, and but it rocked me. It absolutely rocked me, and that was the beginning of a long struggle. Um, yeah, that's really where things started. It was that day. Like I said, it was as you're coming into your early 20s, you're learning about life, you're learning about yourself, but you're also learning to have a different kind of relationship with your parents, where you're transitioning into, oh, we're both, kind of adults. I look at 21-year-olds now, I'm like, bunch of kids, man. But we're coming into adolescence and adulthood and stuff, and it's really weird because, and one of the things that's really hard for me even to this day is that I never got to have the adult conversations, like really take it to different like levels and or layers, and never got to experience those things with my mom. So yeah, that's where it all started. There's no gray area, there's no transition. It's like boom, that was the day, that was the time, that was everything. So
And in your life, from that young perspective of, as you were kind of alluding to, you're still childlike in some ways.
very
You have adult aspects to your life. You're often living independently or working independently, but you still are touching base with your parents. You haven't completely disconnected from them. And to lose the most important person in your life that you were really counting on and just expecting to be there, because that's what we hope for and we expect.
Mhm.
How did you go through the grieving process at that young age?
Drunk. um, that would be like the short answer. You know what? I was doing okay for the first little bit, and then I was not, and I wasn't sure why I wasn't. And that's when I was first diagnosed with having severe anxiety, clinical depression, panic disorder, and self harm. And I had never heard those words before. I was very lucky, and it was also a time, 20 years ago, where that wasn't talked about. It wasn't really discussed in depth. And my parents were and are wonderful parents, but with generationally, it wasn't something that they were taught to talk about. And if you ever heard about it, it was kind of like a punchline in a sitcom or something. Like in a 90s sitcom, like Perfect Strangers or
Mm-hmm.
something, like just some kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just thought I was going crazy. I just thought I thought nobody's ever felt this before, and I'm going crazy. That's the long and the short of it. Like my world is just so. I was diagnosed with that, and then I started taking medication, an SSRI, and it helped a bit. But the thing that I found really helped was self-medicating. And that was where the alcohol came in. And I'd always drank in college, I drank too much in college at times, but even after college, I could turn it off. I could just decide for, 3, 4 months, like, I'm not going to drink, and I could shut it off. Whereas this time I couldn't shut it off. And it went from a want, like, hey, I want to like have some friends over. Let's have a barbecue. Let's have some beers, to a need. And it was, I soon realized that I was very insular with my addictions and with my feelings and my traumas. I'm very like withdrawn. And, I would still party with friends and stuff like that here and there, but every night I was at home getting drunk by myself. Every night in the mornings I was skipping work and started to drink like at 8:30 in the morning and stuff like that. And yeah, self-medicating was, things are perfect for, 15 to 20 beers at a time. You're laughing, you're having fun, whatever happens in the moment, you're like not a care in the world. And then you sober up, and everything that was there before is right there. And everything now that you've done while you've been drinking is right there, and it compounds you. And then I always say, and this is the same too with drugs, and we'll talk about that later, but it's a constant reset. But you're not putting yourself back at zero. You're setting yourself back 2 steps or however many steps every time, because your health is waning. Like I said, now you've made more, like you've got into fights with your girlfriend, or you haven't been there for your family, so you're kind of starting from, and now your health is, it's just, I always find there's that constant reset, but you're setting the bar even lower and lower, just really, really dropping down into despair and depression and all that stuff for many years. But I got extremely lucky, because when I was 25, after about 3.5 years of being a non-functioning alcoholic, I got a really bad case of acute pancreatitis. And that was from drinking. And I was in the hospital for just under a month. I had to have 5 blood transfusions, and I almost died twice. I lost 60 pounds while I was in there, and 40 pounds in the first 2 weeks. And, you're 25 and you think you're invincible. Like, I was gaining weight. I was, you see pictures of me then and now. I look older then than I do now. But at the same time, you're like, whatever. I'm like 25, I'm invincible. It's whatever. And your mortality becomes very apparent in that situation. And it's very sobering, no pun intended, but it's very sobering to be, let's call a spade a spade. But it's when you're sitting there and you're in the hospital ward at night and it's dark, and you're awake because you're in incredible pain, and you're just counting the minutes when you can hit the next morphine button for the nurse to come administer, and the only thing you can hear and see are the lights of the machines that are keeping you alive. And I remember that very vividly, and I was like, I never want to be here again. Like, I can't get here again. Like, right before I checked out, there was a doctor, a pancreas specialist, who was working with me, and he was overseeing my case, and he was a younger guy. And he kind of, right before I was getting ready checked out, like, pulled me aside. He's like, listen, man, like, it was kind of like buddy to buddy, even though he was the pancreas specialist, especially because of his age and stuff. He's like, listen, man, he's like, we don't know how or why you got the severity of pancreatitis you did. He's like, we see this in people who are in their like 70s or 80s, and they've been drinking their whole life. Like, people your age, they'll come in for a day, 2 days, that's it. They're like, this is unheard of. But you've got to know that alcohol can never be a part of your life again. And I was like, doctor, like, I promise you, I promise myself, I promise, like, I don't want any part of it. What I've just gone through, there's not a chance. So yeah, I'm very grateful that that happened because it put a definitive end to my alcoholism. And that was, I don't know, 16 and a half years ago, I think. So I never touched a sip of alcohol again after that. And yeah, never will.
That's incredible. And I think it's really touching and just speaks to the human connection of how you and he connected, and you'd already made that decision for yourself. And honestly, when it comes to goal setting and changing our habits, the only person who can make that decision, as you know, is you. No one else can
Completely.
make that for you.
Completely.
But having someone just hold space for you and just say, hey, like, okay, I see you, I see your goals, and yeah, you need to, you really need to. Instead of
Yeah.
just telling you to do it, they're just holding space for you. It's so important.
Yeah.
And from hearing your story, it feels like losing your life is what really saved your life.
Completely.
Almost losing your life.
Completely. I wouldn't have, and I look back now and I talk to friends that I'm still friends with from then, and I wouldn't have made it another year. Whether I drank myself to death, whether it was by my own hand, whatever, like I wouldn't have made it another year. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. Even with the pancreatitis, I got in there. They're like, if you didn't get in here within 24 hours, maybe 48 hours, you would be dead. Like
Wow.
wherever you stood, like you got here just in time. So I am absolutely the most grateful that it happened. And I think I'm a big believer, and everybody has their own, feelings, spirituality, religion, whatever you want to call it. But I think, there's a reason why that happened. And I think my mom had something to do with that because I wasn't supposed to go down that path. And to have that severity, like I needed it to be that severe with my personality and the way that I've been, and like I need things to be. I need to learn those. Like you said, I mean, people had said, "Hey, maybe you should cut down on drinking." I was like, maybe you should go fly a kite. Like, I mean, I can cut down whatever I want. I just choose.
Right.
I'll choose when to, knowing full well that I couldn't. But I was like, maybe you should mind your own business or something, or like. But yeah, it's you're absolutely right. You can only make the decision for yourself. And I'm not a preachy non-drinker. I don't think everybody shouldn't drink. Like I'm not like at all, at all. What happened to me is very singular. I am extremely happy it happened to me. People who can drink and who can keep it in their life and maintain it, I'm like, dude, more power to you. I couldn't. I don't know how you can. I mean, if I could drink right now, I'd probably be drunk right now. Like it's like I got 4 hours with nothing to do. It's like let's get drunk. But I couldn't do it. And if you can do it, then hey, more power to you. But I always end that by saying, just be careful when it goes from a want to a need. And
Mm-hmm.
I want to come home from work and have a glass of wine and and unwind and relax. And then I need to get home and have a glass or a bottle of wine. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the gray area. And it happens, it just happens before you know it. It shifts, that shift happens, and it's just something to be careful of. But like I said, I'm not a preachy non-drinker at all. But yeah, I'm very glad that it happened the way it did because I needed that. I was a kind of child where I grew up in the time where my parents spanked me, not because they had a bad day and they were just looking for, something to do. It's because I wouldn't have learned from a timeout. Like I would just be in the corner thinking about hockey sticks and tennis balls. Like, I mean, I wouldn't have, I needed something that was like severe to be like, oh, that was bad. So I always say like that was an adult spanking for me. Like I needed it to be that bad in order for me to be like, smarten up. And I wouldn't change it. And I wouldn't change the way that I was raised either. Cause like I said, I deserved every spanking I got and probably a lot more that my parents let me slide on. So
That's a Pandora's box for life coaching right there, that comment.
yeah, right. Seriously.
Deserve.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a golden word, but we won't delve too deep into that here.
Yeah. That's for the next podcast.
That's tough.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a really deep one.
Yeah.
But you really bring to mind, okay, so you have had this almost nearly life-ending experience.
Hmm.
And I've taken care of patients in that predicament. and they've been there a long time. They leave the hospital looking completely different. And okay, now you've gotten your ticket for an opportunity. And this is going to be really, really tough because you are coming at this, yes, with a new mindset, and you've had the life nearly shaken out of you, but you also have a lot of challenges ahead of you. So how did you and when did you come up with your plan for meeting those goals, for staying sober, for changing your life? What did that process look like for you?
I came up with that plan probably 13 years later because I still had a lot more mistakes to make. I didn't understand the concept of trauma and dealing with your trauma. I knew distractions. And whereas alcohol was a distraction, I played lacrosse. I grew up playing lacrosse. I was playing professional lacrosse at the time. So I went into the hospital, came out, I was playing the best lacrosse of my life. And I was like, I'm healthy. I'm going to the gym. I'm like, man. But then I had a career-ending knee injury. I was like, okay, well, when one door closes, another one opens. And I think everything happens for a reason. Like I'm 26 now, and you can't make enough money playing lacrosse. So I had to have a real job, and going to work with, stitches in a black eye, as I have stitches in my hand, not from lacrosse, stitches in a black eye and stuff. It wasn't so cute anymore. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's time to call it. But that's when I looked into modeling, and I decided to do some modeling. My mom was actually a model in the late 70s and early 80s. So I'd grown up like with her around fashion and stuff. And I'd worked really hard to get into shape and learn a lot about the body. That's when I became very fascinated about taking care of the body from the inside out, and then seeing the results on the outside, but knowing that because of the pancreatitis and it being, inside, shutting down my insides, I started learning about like proactive health. And I didn't want to like wait until I got back in the hospital to start to learn these things. And my dad's been really good about that. He's been doing that since the 80s and 90s. Like he's been so good about that himself, but I didn't pick up on it. And I guess, like I said, I needed to make my own decisions, my own mistakes in my own way. So I went into modeling and started modeling, and then I got the opportunity to start traveling and modeling internationally. And it was wonderful. I've met a lot of wonderful people, lived some incredible places, and worked incredible places like South Africa and Miami and New York and London, England, and been all over the world for shoots and all that kind of stuff. And it's been fantastic. I'm still modeling to this day. But there was an incident that happened when I was in Miami, and I had started to, just to rewind a little bit, when I was in South Africa, I had started to notice that I was still working out like a professional athlete. And because of my genetics, I build muscle quite easily. We all have different things and whatever. So I put on size, and I was still working out like a professional athlete because I saw these guys on these covers, and I'm like, oh, I need to like be like them. But when I got next to them, I realized that they were very lean, much smaller, but very lean, different kind of body type. Whereas I'm like lifting 120-pound dumbbells, and it was a very much shift. So I was kind of like putting a little self-doubt or body dysmorphia, just kind of like lingering in my head. So I leave South Africa after 6 months and had a fantastic time. And I go to Miami. And when I get to Miami, I'd only been there for a couple of days. And I had my agency told me that I have a casting, and which is great. I'm like, great, I've been here for 2 days. Like, let's have a casting. Like, but it was what's called a go-see, which is like an individual casting when you're either new to town or you are like you have some new pictures come out or something. A designer or like a magazine will ask to come see you. So I go, and they told me that this is a great client. He'll book you a lot if he likes you. The casting is at 7 or 8:30 at night. I'm like, okay. It's at his house. I'm like, okay. And then they said, oh, and he's a bit of a creep. But like I said, if he likes you, he'll book you a lot. And I'm like, okay. So this is 2010, and it's before the Me Too movement and stuff like that. So I went to the casting, and it was for underwear and swimwear. And I've shot a lot of body stuff like for, my whole modeling career. So it's not a weird thing for me to go in and just like strip down to my underwear or to walk in and like, get down to my underwear. Anyway, so I go in there and I'm trying on some stuff. I go in the bathroom, change, trying on some stuff, go in and change, come back. And as I'm doing that, I'm noticing that like he's starting to get a bit closer. And then I come out and he's like sitting on a stool, like right at my like my bathing suit level. And he's checking out the fabric and I'm like, dude, it's a Speedo. Like, what are you checking out? And you made it. Like, what are you checking? What are you checking for?
Exactly. It's your product.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, like let's keep it moving here. So I go back in and then the next time it came out, he just pulls my pants down and starts to sexually assault me. And I was shocked. I was like, I was in shock. And anybody who knows me knows like I've been in a lot of physical altercations. I've whether it was young, just like being in bar fights. When my mom passed away, a lot of misplaced anger that I was looking for fights a lot and like all that kind of stuff. Lacrosse is a very physical sport, so I had no problem sticking up for myself or teammates, and I've got stitches and all. So I've been in lots of physical altercations. I can handle myself. But I was just in shock. And then my next thought was, okay, I'm going to kill this person and I'm going to beat him to death. And then I thought for a second, oh, wait a second, you might actually beat him to death and the consequences of that. So I was like, you know what? I'm out of here. I was like, keep your stuff. Don't touch me. Get away from me. And I left. And it's weird because, here I am, 225 pounds, muscular, all this kind of stuff. And it's like when you're put in that position, like I've faced off with guys who are like 6'5", 260 pounds, squared up, like, let's go, like, not a problem. But like being in that position and having that happen just so like, I was like, it just completely catches you off guard, like completely just like catches you. So not surprisingly, like 2 weeks later, I started an 8-year battle with an eating disorder because I let this extra trauma, I let it get the better of me. And I started thinking about this body dysmorphia. And I always say that I was a functioning bulimic. And I mean that in the case that like, I'd wake up, I'd eat my healthy meals, I'd take my vitamins. But then when I was left alone with my thoughts, and I came back to like my day's over, all the, the workouts, the shoots, the whatever, all the fun stuff, going to the beach in Miami, all that kind of stuff, all that stuff's over. And I have to come back and I have to sit here with my thoughts. I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like this at all. So I'd get like, $100 worth of junk food and just eat it and then purge it. And I did that for about 8 years. And I was doing okay. Like that held on for a long time and I was still traveling, still doing that kind of stuff. And I decided it was time to move home and back to Toronto because I've been traveling for a while and traveling's fantastic. But when you're traveling all the time and it's for work and you're living out of a suitcase and like you start to make friends or date somebody in a certain like, I'd start a relationship with a girl in like a certain place and they'd be like, oh, hey, you just got a call. You need to go move here now. It's like, oh, well, okay. Well, I just got to like this place and these people, but okay, I'll go start fresh, which is fun and exciting and it's adventurous. But at the same time, it starts to kind of wear on you. And I also wanted to start a fitness business because I'd become very passionate about fitness. I wanted to start my own fitness business and I wanted to get a dog. And my little dog here, Bailey, who's sitting here, like she's never been outside before.
Bailey, come be on camera.
Yeah, right. She's sitting there like she's never been outside. She just came in from outside and she's like she's in purgatory. But I wanted to do those things. So I did that. But I found traveling was a distraction for me. I didn't realize that until I stopped traveling and coming home to the same place every time was, oh, again, here are these four walls. So that's when I went back to, I used to smoke a lot of weed in college and I started smoking weed again. And when I do something, I don't just like dip my toe in the water. Like when I drink, I put myself in the hospital with pancreatitis. When I smoke weed, I'll smoke like 2 ounces a week by myself. And then I heard about Adderall and I was like, oh, so I can get lean and I can get stuff done and I can not be tired. Yeah, I'm all for that. So I was doing that. And then I was doing nitrous oxide, which is like the inhalants, the whippets. And I would be up, if I had the ability to with my schedule, I would be up for on benders for like 4 or 5 days, not sleeping, just drugs, locked up in my house, just enough like to take her out a couple times a day. And I would just be like, my mental health took a massive decline because I was, like I said, I'm very insular, and I was just withdrawing myself from the world. And like, so, but one at a time, my life or the universe was showing me that like these things aren't for me. Like it went from like a cool place where I could just smoke and I could just like sit there and watch cartoons or something and just like chill, to be like, it was a very paranoid place where it started to, like I said, it turned on me where I would just sit there and I'd think about all the stuff that I should be doing now that I'm a business owner, but I didn't have the motivation enough to do it, but I had the anxiety enough to think about all the stuff I should do. I'm like, well, I don't like this. So I got rid of that. And I had a moment where I, with the nitrous, where I was like, I can't do this. Like, this is just not who I want to be. I'm just sitting there huffing these things one after another, and I just got to a point where I just put it all down my garbage disposal. And I did same thing with the Adderall. I got to points, but a lot of addicts will talk about, and like, I know for me especially, like, people are like, what was the rock bottom like, that got you to stop? I'm like, man, I've been through dozens of rock bottoms. And the final straw is usually not even nearly as low as I've been throughout the whole process. It's like the straw that broke camel's back, yes, but I've been in much lower places. I mean, I can't count the times that I dumped out the weed, I dumped everything out, and I was like, the Adderall, I'd take a picture of it in the toilet for my girlfriend or for myself, flush, I'm not going to do this, I'm done with it. And then like a couple days later, I'd be like, ooh, man, it's a lot of feelings. It's a lot of stuff I'm feeling. Maybe I'll just get a little bit more. So either way, I finally got rid of those three. And so now I had nothing, but I had these muscle relaxers that I had been taking, just over the counter muscle relaxers. And I had taken them for a while just because of like aches and pains for working out and from lacrosse and, all my athletic endeavors and stuff like that. And like I said, they're just over the counter stuff. Each pill was like 500 milligrams of methocarbamol and then 200 milligrams of ibuprofen. And I found when I would like be smoking weed and take a couple of those, I'd be like, oof, I feel a little extra loose. So now I had nothing left. So I went all in with these pills. And me being me, when I go all in with something, like, I go all in. So it says like, don't exceed 12 per day or something. And I started and I was like, okay, that's for amateurs. So within about 3 weeks, I went from taking, 15 a day to taking 100 pills every single day. I was taking a bottle of 100. And I don't say this because I'm proud of it. I don't say this because I'm like, it's just a fact. It's a fact of the matter. And I'm not ashamed of it. It is what it is. I'd go in every day. I'd go buy the generic version. It was like $38 and change. I'd get a bottle of 100. I'd come home. I'd pour out like 30 or 40, put them in, swallow them down. As a result, I'm really good at taking pills and vitamins. Not a big deal. But I would, every day I would take 100. And I would just do that over and over. And I started losing weight, and I started to feel really like disassociated and like lightheaded a lot. And I'm like, well, I just took 100 pills the day before. So obviously I'm feeling like the after effects of that. But then I started having fainting spells, and I had a couple fainting spells in my house. And I started like, my anxiety started to ramp up because I'm like, what if I faint when I'm driving or something? Like, what happens if I like, hurt somebody? Or what if I faint in the middle and cause a scene or something like that? And I had no drive, like I had no strength, all this kind of stuff. And it was like, oh, you're just being a wimp. And whenever, a lot of addicts I've talked to, and I know for myself, whenever this stuff's going on, there's it's got to be this. Oh, I didn't have enough carbs today. It's got to be that. And like, oh, you're just being a wimp. Okay, it's got to be that. Or like, you whatever you and it's always like the thing that's right in front of you. Like you don't want to admit it's the thing right in front of you, the substance or the alcohol, whatever it is. You could want to just think it's every other reason or every other excuse. So I finally got to a point where I was getting ready for a shoot one day and I couldn't hold my weight. My knees were buckling as I was trying to brush my teeth. And I went to the hospital and I had major internal bleeding from an intestinal ulcer. Because that stuff was just eating through my digestive system. I mean, 20,000 milligrams of ibuprofen a day, 50,000 milligrams of methocarbamol every single day. And I realized that like, okay, this isn't working. Like I'm 35 years old now and 34, 35, whatever it was. I was like, whatever I've been doing, like this plan I've had for the last 15 years, it's not working. I need to do something different. I can either, and I ran out of like, I'll give myself credit. Like Adderall is kind of a harder drug, but like I kept myself pretty good with like the baseline drugs. I did a lot of them, but marijuana, like those, I did, I knew that the moment I put an oxy whatever or a hydro whatever in my body or graduated to the next level, I was as good as done. So I was like, okay, I can either go to the next level or I can make a serious change. And that change for me was I'm going to go to therapy. I need to learn how to live with the things that are going on in my head and not just keep running away from and distracting myself from them. Because I had started to learn as I gotten older, I was noticing these patterns of distraction and these patterns of running away from it. And I noticed like I said, I'd go about my whole day and I'd be great. I'd be training clients. I'd be going to shoots. I'd be going to the gym. And then I'd be driving home for the end of the night, knowing that all that stuff was over and my anxiety would rise. And I'd be like, I got to get some weed or I got to do something because I've got to go home and sit there with my thoughts. So I started therapy and I'm very glad that I did. But man, was it ever hard. Like I was unpacking all these boxes of trauma and things that I'd been ignoring for years and compartmentalizing and thinking that I was like doing such a good job at just like tucking them away. And then they all came whoosh, like just falling in on me. And I didn't have any substances to help me through it. I had to learn how to be a sober, functioning adult for the first time in my life at 34 years old. I had never been that. Even when I was sober after pancreatitis, I was working out a lot. I had the eating disorder. Traveling so I had to really learn how to do that. And like I said, things got really a lot darker before they started to get better, but they also started to get a lot better, a lot quicker than I would have anticipated. And it was a lot of work. But I always say that I was born on a farm I was born in a hospital, but I was raised on a farm. And when it's summer break and it's beautifully sunny outside, and it was funny. I was just talking to my dad about this, and everybody's up at their cottage, they're doing whatever, they're and I had a wonderful childhood. I would go away to like summer camp for a couple of weeks, but for the most part, you'd wake up and it's sunny, and we've got 3 days that we have to bring hay in, and it's going to be like a 14-hour day. Like, okay, let's do it. Let's roll up our sleeves and let's get to work. Why? Because we have to. I mean, that's the long and the short of it. Like, it's 40 degrees out. It's minus 40 degrees out, and the cows need hay. Okay, I've got to go out there and do that. Do I feel like it? No. Does that matter? No. So with that same mentality and the same mentality I put towards sports, I was like, this isn't going to beat me. I'm going to beat this. And that's what I did with it. And that's how I attacked it. And like I said, it got scary and it got hard, but I just decided like, I'm not going to lose this battle. I'm not going to lose it. And it still is always work. It's always going to be work and learning. And yeah, but it's totally worth it. And for me, that was a huge game changer.
So one thing that I noticed from your story, and you've really circled back to this word repeatedly, is distraction. And you described a childhood where there was a lot of structure and a lot of expectation and just a lot of needs that needed to be met. Whether you wanted to or not, it really wasn't relevant. And then when you discuss the time where your life really, really pivoted and changed was when you lost your mom, who was really the most important role model. Sorry, Dad, but she was really the matriarch of her family and the pivotal structure in your life, and you lost her. And that's when things really changed for you. And that begs the question to me, when you went to therapy and you were really trying to get out of the cycle of distractions, which you have detailed for us in such a beautiful and vulnerable and connecting way, how it was just a cycle of this distraction. And then, I'm strong, so I got out of it. And then this one, and then I'm strong and I got out of it. And then this one, because you hadn't really gotten to the heart of the matter. Then you started therapy. How did you finally address breaking out of that cycle?
Gradually. It took a lot of learning. So, funny story. It's kind of embarrassing, but it's a fact of the matter. So, when I was first started going to therapy, I would go back to the gym because I was feeling healthy now. Comes a siren, perfect timing. I would go to the gym. I'd come back. I'd go to the grocery store. I would get the soup of the day, and I'd get sushi. And I'd come home, and I was like, okay, this is a nice little routine. But then I went in like 2 weeks later to my therapist, and I was like, I think I'm addicted to soup and sushi. And she's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, it's the same mentality that I would have when I'd come home from like work and I would go get like my drugs or alcohol. And she's like, no, there's a difference between routine and addiction. And I was like, okay. And like I said, it's kind of embarrassing to learn that at 35, but it's that's what I had to learn. And I've learned for myself that I cannot dabble in anything anymore. I've had I've gone through a lot of things. I've had a lot of great times and throughout my life as well. It wasn't all just despair and all that kind of stuff. But that was then. And I know now that I cannot dabble in anything. I will never put alcohol in my body. I won't put anything in my body. As much time as I spent trying to alter my state of consciousness, I really relish being in a state of consciousness and steadiness. Whereas before it was like, what can I put in my body to get out of this? Now I really like, and I know that I can't just like, hey, you want to smoke some weed? Like, no, I can't, because I will, like, the moment my body and my mind says, oh, that was fun, that felt good, it will be all that I think about and like all that I want to do. So understanding that is a big thing for me, and not putting myself in situations where that's the thing. I have no problem being around alcohol, because putting alcohol in my body is one of my biggest fears, because I don't know if my body's going to shut down. But if people are around and like having alcohol and stuff, that doesn't bother me at all. I play hockey. I play a lot of hockey. 4 times a week I play on 4 different teams, and guys are drinking beers in the locker room, stuff like that. Cool, doesn't bother me. But I know, like I said, I can't put myself in those situations. I also know that I'm a very routine and very clean person. Not to the sake of OCD, and I don't use that term. I don't like when people use that term, because it's a very serious mental condition that people deal with, and it really ruins people's lives. And people are like, "Oh, I'm so OCD," and like, "Oh, I'm so." No, it's not something to be joked around. Just the same way that like people are like, "Oh, I've got anxiety," and you're like, "Man, don't," or "Oh, I'm so depressed today." It's like, no, those are real words that have real meaning to real people who deal with that stuff. So I just noticed that I like to live very cleanly, and it helps keep my mind in a much less anxious. And I just like being organized, and things like being I know where I like knowing where so and so is going to be when I'm looking for it, and things. So I know that's a big thing for me, and routine, but not to the point where I freak out when I get out of my routine. I'm a go with the flow kind of person, but I'm also a homebody. Like I could go out with my buddies and I could go to a bar and I could have fun. But at the same time, it's like the majority of drunk people are really annoying. I know I was like top of the list. I was either trying to fight somebody. I was like, let's get some like Burger King or something, or I was like, it was just, or so I just don't do that. And I just kind of realized those things about myself that those are like the must do's for me to stay in a good place mentally, and to really constantly be checking in with, evaluating and learning about my mental health. And I think you can never stop learning. That's why I love having like conversations like this. I'm gonna take a lot from this conversation, and like this is a very beneficial thing. And the moment you think you stop learning, you think you get it all figured out, is like the moment you get left in the dust, man. It's like you can never stop learning. The older I get, the more I realize I don't know. But when I was 18, like I had it all figured out, man. Like you need the answer, like, or you got a question, I got the answer. Like forget about it. But yeah, those are things that I've found for me. And like even with dating and stuff like that, like I've found that there are certain things, like I can't be with somebody who drinks, somebody who has a drink with dinner. Every once in a while if we go out, sure, that's not a problem. But I can't have alcohol in my house. I mean, I have a bottle of Dom Perignon on my bookshelf. That's it was it's from a ski trip back in the early 2000s. It's just a memento. But I don't want to have, somebody coming home and having alcohol, and that, that's just a thing for me. And the same thing with, yeah, I've just kind of realized the things about myself and these things that I can and can't do, but I'm very okay with that. And I understand that about me. And yeah, it's just interesting. But I have, great groups of friends, and I'm, I have like I said, my wonderful little sleepy companion over here, and I'm very good at being alone, but I find I put myself in the right situations. I think is the biggest thing, or keep myself out of the wrong situations.
Well, it sounds like being intentional was really important for you and something that came out of therapy.
Yes, very much.
Coping with distractions, did you come up with a certain mechanism beyond, you kind of talked about habits and routine being really important. Was there anything else? So if you felt yourself getting that old pull when I want a distraction, I want to escape, I'm feeling this emotion, did you need at some point to have a safety, that you could pull and something you would do? Or did you get to a point where suddenly that's not scary? The distraction, I've faced it, I've sat in that messiness long enough that the distraction no longer scares me away.
Yeah, I would say it's more so the second, like where I've learned to learn myself. I've 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 learned myself, and I do have moments and times, not moments, but like times where I catch myself in my addictive personality. Like for instance, 2 years ago, like I said, I play hockey 4 times a week. I love hockey. I'm from Canada. It's what we do. It's what I love to do. It's a great way to get cardio in, still, have the camaraderie, being on a team, the competitiveness. And I go to the gym 6 days a week. So I make sure I take one day off. And then I was running 6 miles every day on top of all that. And I was doing that for about a year and a half. And took me about a year and a half to be like, oh, wait a minute. I don't need the 6 miles a day. That's Jonathan being Jonathan. Like, okay, like my knees aren't happy about it. I'm, I'm using it. Like I did like that. It was very meditative for me. I could just go out. I could go out with something in my mind. I would just get in the moment, and I would just go. But I realized I was like, I can't use that as a distraction, and I can't, because my body's saying no, and I'm already on the ice playing 4 games a week. I'm already in the gym for 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. I need to think about, and I catch myself doing things like that where I notice, and I just, and with regards to eating, like I finally beat the eating disorder and got past that, and I'm a big believer in just enjoy what you eat. I enjoy eating healthy, but I enjoy what I eat. Like there are there were many times in my life where I just ate boiled chicken and boiled vegetables. Like, talk about not enjoying what you eat. Like, but I enjoy what I eat. And if I feel like having something, then I'll have it. And if I have a craving or something, I'll satisfy it. And, it's just, it's kind of learning that kind of thing for myself. So, but yeah, I do have to catch myself with those distractions. But you're absolutely right in saying that I've learned how to sit with myself and sit with those feelings and those thoughts, and every day, every night. I mean, it's like I'll wake up I'll have extremely vivid dreams and wake up and just be like, okay, I got to think this through and, get back to bed. And I can totally do it. Is it fun? No. Is it easy? No. Would I rather not? Yes. But, it's better than those years of going to bed drunk and, not dreaming and waking up with a massive hangover, or just going to bed high and not getting good quality of sleep and stuff. So yeah, it's learning tools. I always say I wanted to go to therapy to learn tools. I didn't want to go to therapy to have somebody to call every time I needed to make a decision. I wanted to take control of my life for myself and have the tools in which to make these decisions and learn how to navigate this wonderful thing we have called life and the ups and downs. And I love how, well, when you're addicted or numbed out, you're in a constant gray state where your highs are this highs and your lows are this low. And it's all kind of like, oh, cool. Oh, bummer. Oh, cool. Oh, bummer. And then when you're feeling life, it's like you drop down and you feel those lows, but those highs feel so much better when you're feeling that, like, those emotions, and you're not just like in that state. So that's something I really relish and something that I don't want to compromise. And the more I get these years of sobriety behind me, and it doesn't matter how many years you have and whatever, that's all just individual. Just the more proud I am, and the less I will compromise that or break that. So
That's amazing. And thank you so much for being so vulnerable and sharing your story, connecting with people, because this is something that's a shared experience with many, many, many people. And I think, unfortunately, because we live in a culture where shame is such a knee-jerk reaction inside of our own hearts, and because of who we are as people, because of the way that our brains are made, we kind of think everyone else thinks the same that we do. So when we shame ourselves, we also make false assumptions about what other people are thinking about us and our lives as well. And when we decide to be brave and we decide to say, I'm not doing shame anymore, I'm going to take ownership of the good and the bad, and I'm going to take the lessons, and I'm going to take my story, and instead of having it in this old frame that doesn't serve me, I'm going to reframe it. It's the same story, but I can use it to propel me forward instead of to anchor me in the past. And that's the beauty of what you're doing with sharing your story so openly and being so honest, because you've been through a lot. And I know that I myself resonate with so much of what you shared. And I am certain that many, many listeners and viewers will also resonate and will be grateful to have you sit in that space with them. This is something that is really near and dear to me. And I'm really passionate about starting podcasts and having these conversations here, in part because I think often the first conversation we ever have about these experiences is between our head and a podcast or a book. We don't necessarily have these conversations with a living human. The first time we have them, it's a character in a movie that resonates with us, or we listen to a really vulnerable, amazing podcast, or we read a really touching book, and we recognize ourselves in someone else. And we realize, like you said, like you thought it's just me when you were young. You thought, I'm just alone in this. I'm isolated. And so you stayed there for years and years and years in isolation. And the truth is, we're all living these stories in parallel. And we just need to come together. We need to come together and share.
Yeah, it's so true. It's very true. There's so many times throughout my life where I thought it's just me, and I had resigned to the fact that I'm going to be a drug addict the rest of my life, and I'm not going to get through this. And like you said, with regards to shame and vulnerability, I for the longest time thought vulnerability is weakness, and I will never tell people that I was sexually assaulted or that I had an eating disorder, because those are kind of girly things, and like, look at like how did that even happen or whatever. But I've learned that vulnerability is power. Vulnerability absolutely is relinquishing that power. And the first time I talked about this publicly, I walked in the gym and I'm like, whoa, everybody's looking at me because they know my secrets, because I just posted something on Instagram. And I walked in the hockey locker room, same thing. And I was the same person that walked in the last time. And, somebody pulled me aside and they're like, hey man, that was a really cool video you did. Like, thanks for doing that. And I was like, wow, like, thanks for saying that. Like, I didn't think anything of it. And yeah, it's incredible. I think it's wonderful that you have this platform and what you're doing to help people realize that they're not alone. And the biggest thing, for me, was the reason I can talk about this stuff now is because I've learned true forgiveness and forgiveness to myself. So within the last, 13, 14 months since I've been talking about this publicly, it's only because at that time, I finally learned what forgiveness is. And I forgive myself for going down the path of alcoholism and drug addiction and all that kind of stuff and making those mistakes. Do I wish I had the money back? Oh my gosh, yes, I do, because it was so much money. So much. Can I ever get the time back? No, absolutely not. But I was trying. I was trying my best with what I had. And I can look at it that way. And then there's the other part where it's like my mom and losing my mother and the sexual assault. It's like, well, those are things I didn't bring upon myself, but I can forgive myself for them, forgive myself for them happening to me, because they're unfortunate facts of life and they've happened. And now it's a part of my life. So I've genuinely, just like with the, when it's time to stop drinking, you can't, nobody can tell you, it's when you decide for yourself. I've genuinely learned how to forgive myself and not feel that shame. And man, it is like a literal weight is lifted off of your shoulders. And I don't suggest that everybody comes on a podcast and talks about it. And I don't think that going on a podcast makes one person better than the other. I don't think any of that stuff. But I just ask that people, start to talk. And when people come to me and they're like, hey, can you help me with this? I'm like, I would love to. I think the first thing you should do is go talk to a medical professional. I think that's the first thing you should do. I can tell you anecdotally things that I do and things that have helped me. But I think if you have the access to, go speak to a mental health professional or talk to a friend, or, start to and it is literally like you feel the weight lifting off your shoulders and you're like, holy, I've been carrying this around for 15 years. Yikes. But I think that's life. And I think it's an important thing to do, and to really realize that we are stronger than we give ourselves credit for. We have a lot more resilience and strength than we give ourselves credit for. And like I said, I'd resigned to the fact that, okay, I'm going to be drug addict the rest of my life. And then when I decided to get sober, I was like, okay, I'm going to really do this. I'm just some regular dude who's just just trying to do life. So if I can do it, anybody can do it. And it's just one little step at a time. And it's taking meaningful, purposeful steps. But yeah, just knowing that it's a marathon, not a sprint. True forgiveness, and treating ourselves the way that we treat other people. A lot of times we'll go out in the world and we'll hold doors for people and say, bless you, when they, sneeze, or, excuse me. And then we'll look in the mirror and be like, you're a loser and you are failing at life right now. And it's like, how am I going out and being that person to them? And then I'm turning around and being this person to me. It's like, I deserve the same that I'm giving to them. And it's really important to start here and then push it forward.
Yeah, and the weight of those words, just like the weight of your inspirational words, can literally save someone. I think many of us have been in a dark moment in our life, and a one word from a stranger saved our life. I mean, that is the power of words. But on the other side of that, the power of the words that we are saying in here all day long, every day, they have as much or more weight. And so until we become really intentional with our mindset and our relationship to ourselves, we're not going to thrive. And we're not going to grow like we could, because we are putting ourselves in a box, and we are what we say we are.
Yeah, it is so true. This is our greatest asset or our worst enemy. And it's really hard. And it's a constant pull. And it's, it's not a like snap, best asset, best friends. It's a constant back and forth. But you're right. And it's the weight of like the words and the way we treat ourselves and the way we talk to ourselves. It is like you said, it's mindset. It's hard, but it's the most important thing that we can do, because that decides who we are for ourselves and who we put forward for the rest of society and the rest of the world, for our loved ones, and then for the rest of the world and who we're putting out. And it decides who we're going to be. But it all starts with us and learning. That's why I love having these conversations, because the things that I've heard you say, like you said, those words and stuff, and hearing things like differently, and like, that's stuff that I'm going to be laying in bed tonight thinking about, like, man, yeah, that was pretty cool when Dr. Shafer said that way. And like, yeah, that's, it's totally, we can never stop. And yeah, that's why I love doing these things. Is like, I love sharing my story to help with people. But I love selfishly helping. I love sharing like my story because it's continuing to help me. And helping people is a wonderful byproduct of that. And that's all I want to do is, as cliche as it sounds, whatever, I want to help make the world a better place and help other fellow human beings and people but I also want to keep helping myself and keep learning. So that's all I'm doing.
Well, I can assure you, I think you're definitely going to impact a lot of people's lives and their mindset. And I really appreciate you for having this conversation with me.
No worries. No, I really appreciate that very much. Thank you. And I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think it's a wonderful platform. I applaud you for doing it. I'm working on starting my own podcast as well. And I might be calling you.
Please do. I would love to.
I do really appreciate it. I know that you're helping people immensely. And I'm just very grateful for you giving me the opportunity to come on and have this conversation with you and to learn from you. And yeah, I just thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you so much for being here. And do you have any links, anything that we can put here so that people know how to follow your journey?
Sure. Yeah. I'm on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube is Jonathan Niziol, and that'll be spelled in the show notes. And then my website is Jonathan Niziol Official, and then the same with my Facebook page is Jonathan Niziol Official. And I love connecting with people. I love hearing from people, direct messaging and stuff, and hearing about their things they've been through, what they're going through, things that they've learned. I really do love connecting with people. So I'm happy to please reach out. Yeah, that's the best way to find me.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. And thank you to everyone at home for listening and watching. And we wish you are safe and that you are continuing on this growth journey. And we thank you for joining us today. I'll see you later. Take care.